Only here's to getting by. Separate to terminate. Peoples of this land. No more, we say. This is the day we all take a stand. Still here, fully alive and vocal, we survive genocide. From colonizers now called locals. Still here, fully alive and grateful, we survive genocide. Legalized by kings, courts and Catholics. Watch the world beginning to whirl in circles. Watch the world beginning to whirl in circles. May our hearts know the day we feel the sun's pure ray, and all have equal say. May our hands show the way to heal the earth and stay. Watch the world beginning to whirl in circles. Watch the world beginning to whirl in circles. Welcome everyone to our fourth session in the series exploring dark and malevolent forces that take over humanity. We've had quite a time with this exploration, and it's been very challenging. So we're very happy to be in the fourth and final session tonight. Happy to have you with us. We have a a new part that we've recently added, and it's community engagement. So you'll see something a little bit different tonight. You'll see some people from the community sharing their experiences in videos, and there's a written statement that I'll read to you also. So please, please think about joining us in our next series in this way. When you listen to the song we just played, it was a song that came to me in a dream a couple of years ago during my preparation, my inner preparation that I didn't really know was happening, was preparation for Hurricane Helene, which was very devastating here. And I'm grateful to my psyche and my ancestors for help with such a traumatic event and many others in my life as well. The song appeared first with the name of our Tsalagi immortals, Nanai, introducing their presence. They're similar to the ancient Greek and Taoist mythological human patterns of energy. They said in the dream song, "Honey, here's to getting by," consoling us for centuries of being in a survival state necessary to endure genocide in this country of the native people. Then they encourage standing in our strength and being vocal as we take a stand against division, feeding termination of the peoples of this land. The song calls out kings, courts, and Catholics for the action in the doctrine of discovery and colonizer locals still holding dominance. And this is the land along the rivers that felt the floods destroy their homes and take the most lives. Over 100 lives were taken by that storm. And it was unlike anything in the last 100 years. Nature seeks balance, and we humans came here to help create balance through boundaries with the darkness of the astral realm. This is referred to as spiritual waves. This wave of humans came in with, also called the original instructions from the beginning of this wave, where we all share ancestors. Many waves of humans have preceded us, and we will only continue to exist if we hold this balance within Earth as helpers and protectors. Our first session helped identify dark and malevolent forces through myths and ways of deepening our understanding. All of our previous sessions are recorded and available here on this YouTube channel. The second session helped us recognize these energies, and the third session helped us deal with them in our everyday life. Our current culture is possessed by the archetypal authority pattern in abuse instead of helpful protection. We will learn here tonight how to stand together and change this dominance culture with our everyday awareness in the choices we make regarding decolonization. This moment by moment action can return balance to Earth and mend the sacred hoop we started life with as this wave of humans. And we started this series with mending the sacred hoop. And that led us to this exploration and the grappling that we've endured through these last 4 sessions in this very deep topic. So now we are watching the world beginning to whirl in circles. Just like the song said, Our next exploration series will help us recognize how the animals are teaching us to be more fully human and use the parts of our brain that appear to be idle, according to our science. This is based on our Tsalagi prophecy of the fifth world we're on the verge of entering. First, the stones were here on earth, so they are our eldest, bringing water next, and then together bringing plants, and then animals, which we are a part of elementally. Please join us with sharing stories and experience of these ways that we've learned from animals that help support balance and boundaries within Earth as our home and part of the energy cycles we experience here. So at this time, we're going to call on our grandmothers, and after they speak, we will bring in our community engagement, and then we'll hear from the guys. So I would like to ask Marcia at this time if she's ready to share with us some very helpful and deep, deep understandings of colonization systems and how we can become aware of them and make our choices. So, Marcia, if you're ready, would you please come in and talk to us?
Yes, thank you, Gail. Thank you. I have to emphasize that she's talking about our exploration as we're working through this topic and mending the hoop. And just say that really the journey here to this fourth in the series has been not an uncomfortable journey. But the uncomfortableness really had us dig deep into something that we typically don't even want to look at, the dark forces and how we really carry forward through the training, through the indoctrination, through the societal thinking that we've grown up in, and that typically we want to, like my mother used to say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all. So we want to not say it at all when we recognize these dark and deep forces. And then our interpretation, when she's talking about how do we now interpret that? How do we see it? And our tendency to look and say, oh, the dark forces are over there. The dark forces are over there. And so this has been for us a journey about really embracing and owning the dark forces in ourselves. And where we're looking at the colonized mind, that those preconceptions, those trainings and indoctrinations of thinking that we really in our whole life, because we've been engaged completely in the colonial mind. And now is just emerging the idea of taking responsibility and shifting that through our own experience and our own responsibility in our expression, our interpretation, our responsibility for our experience. We see not only the dark forces at the level that we've discussed, where we see the suicides and the murders and those really clearly ugly things, but we started to look deeply into those areas where the colonized mind really has crept into our lives and we didn't even see it. That insidious nature of the colonized mind that came forward to own. And during our conversations, of what I realized, because I worked a lot in trying to figure out how the government is and how we got there and what we do about it, is a lot of people are becoming more aware of the nature of the birth certificate and what that does, and how the birth certificate literally has titled the physical being of the infant to the state as a parent, and And I've looked at
Mhm.
the paperwork and how it appears on the paperwork and the estate and how they act in the courts with regard to parents and parents' rights and this whole doctrine that they call the doctrine of parens patria, which means that the state is the parent and the parent rights aren't there. And as I was walking through this journey, it's interesting how email and messages and videos come into your reality when you're on the journey for this discovery. And one um, video came through from a man who's been studying and has a lot of background in how that all happened. How does the state have interest, a primary interest in us and our children? And because we've lived in that soup of colonized mind, kind of we call it law, but the colonized mind all of our lives. So, and in this video, as I'm listening to this man talk about the nature of the birth certificate and how that happened, one of the things he said, and this was called the story of the mother. And so he was telling the story of the mother, and he made the comment that the hospitals and uh, stations, the emergency stations, the fire stations, and the churches are what are called foundling institutions. And what a foundling institution is some place where a mother who really can't psychologically, physically, however they feel, they can't take care of a newborn child or a child. They can come to this foundling institution and without having any legal ramifications, without committing a crime, or they can literally turn over their child for the child to be raised in a manner that they don't think that they're able to do. So that's what a foundling institution is. And in the conversation, this gentleman said, somewhere deep in the walls, somewhere on the walls of the hospital, is a plaque that says that this is a foundling institution. And it occurred to me, I mean, that depth of the colonized mind that we didn't realize, we didn't know, we didn't even think about or have the ability to think about, that the hospital itself, when we go in to deliver our children, the presumption is we're coming to a foundling institution for the state to take the duty to raise our children. And no matter how we end up, we take them home or we do, we didn't realize we stepped into a foundling institution and entered them into that law form, that colonization, that really abandoning. I mean, because I could see it in the forms, I could see it in how did we abandon our children to the state. But the depth of that colonized mind, the depth of the deception, the depth of the unawareness really struck me how insidious and how invisible and how silent that colonized mind can really be. That we step into a foundling institution we don't know is a foundling institution. The mother on the birth certificate is called the informant. So the mother is informing that the child is being born. The doctor says, yes, the child is born. The father is not, is listed, the mother's maiden name is on there, the father's name is on there, but sometimes the father isn't even listed on there. So the presumption through the paperwork and through the activity of going into a foundling institution to deliver your child is presumed in law to be an abandonment of that child under this whole quiet and deeply buried colonized mind, that colonized institution, the colonized. So that it struck me. I mean, I cried. You know, I didn't know I'd abandoned my children at that level. I didn't know the presumption that I would have abandoned my children. And I was so glad that I actually had some of my children at home. And I knew instinctively, I knew in my heart that I couldn't go into the hospital and do what they were asking me to do. But it's so we're so motivated and so moved by a colonized mind that we don't see, that's invisible. We see the gross effects of it, the upset, the despair, the homelessness, the lack of energy to even bring your divinity forward, to bring that Christ, that natural being of who you are. But it's really realizing the depth of that deception and the depth of our are just moving with that colonized mind, that invisible depth of deception. For me, on the journey, getting to that depth, uh, and the awareness, that awareness, I think, is so important. How can we even address a colonized mind that we can't see is there? That these little clues come up. And so over these 4 months that we've been getting to this point of, how do we overcome the colonized mind? We have to look deeper. We have to take responsibility for, I did that. What are the implications? What is really happening? Every mother who goes into a hospital to deliver their child is presumed to be abandoning that child. We have to tell the truth about the web of deceit and silent colonization. I mean, we see that when the whole cultures armies are coming, they kill people off, and the genocide and the crimes against humanity and the big displays of that. But the subtleties are what even allows the big displays to occur. So that for me was, why I wanted to bring that. We are each responsible for the depth of our vision, the depth of our seeing what we're actually participating in. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcia, for bringing that into our awareness. It's incredible to think about these things and what we don't know and don't
Hmm.
realize.
It's, it's,
So,
it's like I don't know is no longer permissible. It's no longer permissible when we're overcoming the colonized mind. We have to own. I mean, I did it. I took my child into the hospital, and now I know what it was I did. I'm fully responsible for it. Not like to blame, responsibility like a lift off my shoulders, not like another burden to take on.
and so once that happens, is there anything that can undo that
Oh,
action?
absolutely. There's always a remedy.
Yeah,
There's
thank you.
always a remedy.
That's great to know now that we know what's going on, that there is a way to take care of it. Thank you so much, Marcia. And at this time, we have our grandmother in Brazil who just finished her eagle dance and is going to bring us some words from that wonderful dance that she did. Patricia, will you share with us now?
Yeah, I got to breathe deeply because I was going to share what all these months that we've been sharing, I was going to go in one direction. But after the eagle dance and what happened these last 2 days, something completely different, that unexpected, that I feel like sharing with all of you. It was very deep. We're 10 days, 4 days of dancing and going deep inside to with our own and our shadow showing up and all this. But something that happened when I came out and I looked at this horizontal to now world, and I heard about such horrible things that were happening with respect to the sexual energy, the abuse, the child pedophilia, the island, and all that thing. I won't get into names, and that nobody wants to even talk about it. But that really touched me deeply. How can that be? How can that happen? It's so wild, this, you all know what I'm talking about. And that brought into my memory something that I experienced directly related to something of that sort, which is related to sexual energy, which I wasn't going to even talk about. But somehow that came yesterday, and I said, no, I got to share this. And how the spiritual predators that we're talking about here use this energy, the sexual energy that can be transformative and so beautiful, the sexual energy, how it can be used by the spiritual predators that we're talking about to deviate us completely. And no. And I remember, and this is what I'm going to share, because about 20 years ago, which I was part of a group, a Gurdjieff group, and my masters, my gurus, after 20 years that I had spent with them, then a scandal happened. And they were doing, with the woman there, like you've probably heard a lot of this in many, how this has happened. And I saw it happen directly with close people and one thing that I want to share is easily it can be used, how the spiritual predators can come in using our sexual energy to completely deviate us from the spiritual path. And the main person of the story, which was a close friend of mine, after she shared what had happened and all this, I won't get into details, she said something that I think is very useful for us at this moment, how easily it can happen. We all have specific, like Gurdjieff would say, main features that are very delicate where nobody can tell us, oh, you have to find out. And what she said, that her main feature was vanity. And so through vanity, it was so easy for this guru to grab her, and she became the queen of all the women that were being abused by them. And they were all caught in this, oh, he's our guru, he's teaching us something. And it was really amazing to observe, watch, and I didn't get into that, but I observed clearly what happened. And now with this story that just happened, or that I became aware of just recently, that a lot of you guys know about the sexual abuse, the pedophilia, and all that in the island, how that shadow takes. So it's like there's an archetype, the guru archetype, that actually takes over, and we're blind to that. It's like there's a big shadow there that we don't want to even look at. How do we are easily hooked by these gurus with their spiritual, you know, predators. And like Castaneda said, I don't know how I convinced you you've been sieged, that we've been taken over, How do we do that? And one thing is this, identify within ourselves that weak point, that weak spot that we have, that each one of us has, and that can be easily a hook to fall off our authentic path. In this case, sexual energy, which is something that easily is used to deviate us from our path. And I really feel that shadow, can take over so many people and put so many masks and so many costumes and so many behind the power that is being used, the money, all that. But there's this difficult to even find words to express it. And I went through that and I saw it. I stayed in the group. A whole bunch of people left because of this. I stayed another 6 months to observe because no, this cannot be real. So I was there observing. Well, anyways, lots of details there. And I finally realized I left the group. And now again, I'm seeing it happen over and over again through many spiritual guides. I have a friend that he might be watching, but he was part of the Abadiânia, João de Deus, an amazing guy who did healing that was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful to so many people. But at the same time, his weakness drifted him on this area of sexual abuse. Also, you must have heard of João de Deus in Abadiânia, and my friend was telling me about that when we were sharing. But it's something that I think that the sexual energy is something that, and I think that we're not educated about this dark energy. Not ever, there's a domestication, a socialization, a misuse of sexual energy that opens the door for the shadow to come in. But if we don't identify within ourselves our weak point, that main feature that is there, that will be easily caught, and we all get caught by the shadow. So we have to, there is a way out, Marcia, that you were saying there is a way out, which is look within, stalk within ourselves and see where is that little spot that we can be easily reactive and jump out like an animal, and have these. So just to summarize here, this is what I wanted to share. I didn't expect to share this. I hope you guys don't get upset with me because it wasn't part of our talks, but it came so spontaneously, and I was so sad yesterday when the information about this group of people in the island and this and that came to the surface. That was a clear example for me of Wetico, of the spiritual predators, and how easily people can get caught there. But we have a way out. If we look within ourselves, identify our weak spots, and are very, very present to this predators that come to deviate us. So that's what I wanted to share right now. Thank you so much. This group is wonderful. Thank
Yes,
you.
Teresa, it is wonderful. Yeah. So grateful that we come together in these ways and deep dive and support each other. And thank you for sharing that very, very important, sneaky colonization of power
Yes,
abuse.
sneaky colonization is a good word.
Yeah.
And how can we decolonize, right?
Yes. And form these communities to support each other in that work, which is so critical now.
Yeah,
And
thank
at this
you.
time,
If I may insert another thing that you mentioned, stalk yourself. That's such an incredible concept, and I really want to emphasize that because in some of the work I do, I call it the quantum observer. So you're literally observing yourself and observing your replay of the colonized mind. For instance, sometimes, anytime we say "I am," we're really bringing forward we're establishing ourselves by whatever we say after that. So if I say I am confused, we're bringing that colonized mind of confusion, that disruption into not only our thinking, but it's a habit of speaking where we're actually creating that colonization again out into the world. That stalking yourself, observing yourself, where it's easy to say, well, I can see that over there. But the stalking and observing yourself is what really shifts the colonization on a one-to-one basis. Thank you.
right. Yeah. Thank you, Marcia. At this time, Pamela, would you mind reading a quote from John Trudell? He had some really special words about colonization that we want to share at this time.
So John Trudell was a Native American author, poet, actor, musician, and political activist. And here's a quote from him from 1980. "We must never be afraid. The only thing we should be afraid of is that we have lived our lives without honor. We should not worry about dying. We should worry about trading existence for life, letting these manipulators and these bad people control our lives so that we cannot live it, so that we cannot understand our spiritual connection to the earth. We are trading our life for existence. We must understand what that connection has to slavery, because then we are not free. We must understand that slavery is more than the shackles they put around someone's ankles. Slavery is the prisons that they build in our minds through their institutionalized madness. That is, that is slavery. We were not put here on the sacred Mother Earth to work for IBM or for the Air Force or for Standard Oil. We were put here to honor the earth. That is our obligation.
Thank you, Pamela. That is a very good observation. And at this time, I would like to share some of my experiences in my family to help you contrast the difference between the indigenous ways and the colonized ways that I grew up in. Because when I was a child, we were required by law to assimilate. So I went to school in a small town of mainly colonizers. But on the weekends and in the summers, our family of 12 families were always on the 50-acre farm in the small community my mother grew up in. We lived in our ancestral woodlands peoples and Tsalagi ways because those were the only ways they knew of being family. In the school and the town, people spoke of each other with gossip and mean-spirited competition. And I could feel that discomfort in my bones with the feeling and the frequency of the darkness those words and intentions called in. But on the farm, the grandmother spoke of the ancestral patterns we saw each child carry. We all nurtured these gifts. We honored them by asking for their help. There was no difference in value of these gifts. There was no thought of money among us, only balance and kindness. In the town, there was the energy of being above others, being better than neighbors because of the way we worked and the money value that was placed on our work. And this created the imbalance that called for competition to survive in a system of never having enough or being enough. The darkness came in through the colonizer desperation of class and ranking and felt like the opposite of kindness. In the town, children walked over a mile home from school and felt danger at every turn, even though it was a small, fairly peaceful place. If ripe wild berries stopped us as we cut through a neighborhood, we felt fear of being yelled at or chased away. On the farm, we gathered the baskets, and at least a dozen of us, all ages, went out and gathered the fruits and nuts, enough to share with everyone there and prepare together for winter. The only fear was for poison ivy and copperhead snakes, so we teamed up to spot them and show respect. To them, this brought a level of joy I never experienced in the colonizer town or school system. The stories and memories we shared on the farm were mainly for the laughter they brought every single time. Of course, the tears were there too, creating balance. They were mostly from memories of those on the other side. In the town, the stories were on plaques and about battles oppressing indigenous culture and claiming dominance and ownership by forces mostly malevolent and based on racism, which is one of the most valuable examples of malevolence. When choices were challenging In the colonizer system, the closest attempt to fairness was called consensus, but this opened up to dominance and manipulation. My experience of ancestral ways went beyond this to be sure everyone was heard and the highest and best opportunity for kindness was reached. Everyone felt this together and felt good about the outcome that was co-created equally. So I hope you can make some choices based on my experience and those words. And it's time for our new part of this series that we are calling community involvement, because we want to be example of community. And so several people who've been watching in the series offered to contribute their own experiences. And this time I want to start with the youngest. We're bringing in the younger generations, and it's wonderful to have their voice heard as well. So I want to start with a letter from a dear friend who is also one of my Jungian clients and has been for years. She's done wonderful work. And she grew up in Littleton, Colorado, where the first school shooting took place in Columbine, and the shooter was her neighbor. So she wants to share with us in this letter that I'm going to read. I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, a suburb outside of Denver, where the first major school shooting took place, Columbine. It was 1999 and I was 4. I do not remember it, but it forever left an imprint on those that lived through it and the town thereafter. As a child, I was unaware, but as I got older, the horrors of the event made themselves known to me. Through conversations and stories, I knew that something horrible had taken place in this town I called home, but I never fully grasped the gravity. The story of the ordeal existed quietly in the background until one day I found myself on YouTube watching the uploaded footage from the shooting. My family had a computer tucked in the corner of our living room where we were free to browse and explore anything we wanted to. One afternoon, I found myself glued to the screen watching documentaries, interviews, and actual footage from the event. I explored all that I could and went down a dark rabbit hole. As a young preteen, I worked hard to understand what I was watching. The darkness and the gravity gripped me. As a young adult, for the first time, I was processing the horrors, devastation, and trauma that had taken place. From my parents' memory, in the weeks following the event, the weather was gloomy, wet, and cold. For weeks and weeks, the town struggled to lift the heavy fog and grief that hung in the air, a horrible tragedy that forever lingers. These tragic things happen. Horrible, painful, disturbing things happen to all of us. Tragedy exists in our world in an infinite number of ways, and we are left to face it and find ways to make sense of it. It's the making sense of that we wrestle with the most. It comes down to just wanting to know why and wanting the answer to give us relief from the trauma and the loss. Will we ever know why? Will there ever be an answer that suffices? What will we do with that answer? How does that answer call us to act? How does it impact us? How do we move forward? Maybe that's what's worth uncovering. Not why these things happen, but how we choose to move forward in life because of them. And finding out what part of us these tragedies ignite that wants to come forward. In my opinion, facing these darknesses is important, and they help us connect with our humanity and our unique purposes. And I'm grateful to Maddie for sharing her views and her experience on that very deep, tragic event. And at this time, Pamela, if you would play our video from another in the millennial generation, who is also a dear friend and they've both been firekeepers here in our Sweat Lodge community for over 7 years now. And Pamela, if you would share that video from Michael Tree, we would hear his perspective on what do we do now? How do we decolonize our minds?
So thank you, Gail, for asking me to speak on this subject. I've had some time to reflect, and this subject is an interesting one because it's something that is elusive in that as you try to become decolonized, you can often there's a maybe an attempt to recolonize with to replace with something else. So maybe a colonized perspective might be, well, I'm Christian, so therefore I'm good and Christ is with me. And then you learn about other ways, and so now you say, oh well, I'm on the red road, so I'm good and this way protects me. And and you miss something in that, where you're attached to an outcome and you're attached to a process instead of being in the experience. And I think that's a really critical aspect, is to notice what the experience is. And the drawbacks of colonization is like denying the experience of others because of an experience you want to have. And when you're inside that framework, obviously you're not experiencing it that way. You're experiencing this is just the way it is. But and then when you're watching it from the outside, it's like, how could somebody be harmful like that? Like, how could they do that? And then so often people have these frameworks that they believe so much in that it's more important than how it affects the people around them or the environment. And so I think that's one of the critical things, is having your allegiance to something greater than yourself, something outside of yourself, whether it's your family, whether it's your community, whether it's, the next person you see, the environment, being of service and not putting yourself above others. And really that happens on the inside as well, where the thoughts of how I should be have precedence over your own experience, and you can be harmful to yourself in a way that is, you're colonizing your own experience. You're snuffing out your heart's experience with what the mind believes is right. And more specifically, spiritually, I think a lot of people want to like find that place that's up in order to feel like they're connected. And, I think there's some trickiness with that, where you can reach outside of your grasp and you're actually just vacating your own vessel instead of really experiencing it. So, in a esoteric sense, instead of like reaching up, you're actually like sinking down, and that gives you the foundation to be able to expand upwards. And so you're inviting that in rather than going outside of yourself to find something. And so you're still united with that heart experience instead of like just a longing that happens to be in your heart. And so, yeah, I think experience is a good guide in that way, where when you are in alignment, it does feel different than when you're really coming from your mind.
Thank you, Pamela. And of course, Michael also studies Taoism, just like Patricia does, and reflects those values. And it's good to see that depth and awareness in the younger generations. At this time, Pamela, we have a video from Marquita Solis. If you would play that one, please.
Everyone, I'm Marquita Solis, an uncaged heart coach, and I work with men who are struggling with the man mask, which really separates them from the true essence of who they are in our living world. So I just wanted to share a little story with you. I had a friend of mine who asked me for her help, and this story relates to the colonization and decolonization, the effects of decolonization, which, well, we'll get into that more. But so first of all, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not giving advice. I'm just sharing a story with you. So she had a lot of paranoia and a lot of issues, and she needed help. And I said I would help her and help her stay at her house while she was doing medical procedures. And I did that. And it was very hard for me because she didn't want me to leave the house ever because, well, colonization might, might, would possibly say that she had a mental illness and that she needed drugs, and which all can lead down really heavy paths, because once you start taking certain drugs and taking other drugs, and you know, it can really escalate, where it really puts you into a state of paranoia, which is what she was diagnosed with diagnosed with. I mean, that's the medical term, and that's another example of colonization. So, and yes, she had a lot of issues. So she did not want me to leave ever. And that was very hard for me. I had to get out of the house, and I couldn't just stay there 24/7 with her. And it came down to later where she started thinking there were bugs all over the place and seeing bugs when there weren't any. And she would get mad at me because I wouldn't acknowledge there were bugs. And it was making me feel almost like I was losing my mind. And then I could have gone down that route, where colonization, you know, would say that I was going insane, or breaking down. But I had to not, I had to make sure to stay grounded in nature and not go down that path. Um, so that is why I really recommend this series, um, because this is being able to recognize those forces and to be able to stay grounded in these dark forces that can take us down if we're not aware or we're not prepared. So the path I took to deal with these attacks on me, where she was saying that I was stealing money from her, and that there were bugs everywhere, and why couldn't I see them? And she would launch attacks on me. And yeah, and what I had to do was go back to nature, go to the trees, and ask the trees for help as I was struggling to stay grounded, because I started to really question my own sanity. And yeah, and the dark forces can make you feel like you're not connected to Earth when we really are connected to Earth. It's our innate way of being. So what saved me was being in the sun and meditating with sunlight and the water, going to the lake and sitting at the lake all day and quiet with my feet on the earth and asking the trees, all of the trees on Red Top Mountain for help. Stand with me so I know who I am and stand in integrity with me. So I'm not going to be overcome by these dark forces and being deceived by colonization, that mindset, or the ideas that something is wrong with me. But the only thing that would be wrong would be to disconnect from who I am and my integrity and to disconnect from Mother Earth. So that's why this series again is so important, to be able to recognize the dark forces so we can stand in integrity and become grounded. And the more we can connect with Mother Earth, the more that we are able to handle the darkness of life and to shine and to thrive during these dark times.
Thank you, Pamela. We have one more community engagement video from someone who was initially in our grandmother's council. And Pamela, if you would play the video from Patricia, she's sharing a very immediate situation that she's dealing with that will help you recognize darkness and things that can come over us and situations that can occur in our everyday life.
So I've been invited by grandmother Gail to chat a little bit about a topic to do with malevolent energies. I believe that was maybe entities, energies, identities. It's a darkness that comes through humans, from my experience. I haven't experienced this malevolent stuff come through anything else in my life besides humans. I mean, even facing something like a really angry dog, it's still not malevolence. The malevolence just seems to be something that just comes through human beings somehow. My name is Patricia White. I was born in Montana in 1951, and my mother brought my sister and I up to British Columbia, where we were raised in what's known as the Caribou area, which was real cowboy town growing up. And I had a near-death experience when I was 13. I was thrown off the back of a horse and landed on a fence post, or the horse landed on my back. I don't know which, but I lost my kidney at that age, and I was not present for a certain period of time. And then when I re-entered this body, I re-entered as another person, another little girl. And of course, it wasn't until I was in my 60s, I guess, that I actually came across this term walk-in. And somebody was talking about walk-ins. And I was listening and thinking, that's what happened to me at 13. Because the little girl who came into my body knew all these old friends, knew the school, knew this family, but she wasn't the same girl that I was before I had this out of body experience. So my whole life, it's been in a way occupied by two different spirits. And one of the spirits is the one who can maneuver quite easily in the system that has been created by the colonials. And that's the little girl who was in high school and who was happy and who was a cheerleader and doing good in school. But this other little girl who came in looked at it all and said, this is all BS. There's nothing real about any of this. Nobody's telling the truth. And here I am stuck in this body and this world where I don't know, nothing makes sense to me. And so the little girl who was attempting to continue in the world that had been manufactured by this colonial bunch of people kind of fell to the wayside, and the other one who was a truth seeker emerged. My journey has been an interesting one. And recently, I got involved with another grandmother, and we had a shared vision and a shared purpose of creating a traditional village, a healing village, where we would be teaching both ways of living from the land with ancient skills of fishing and hunting and gathering and this, because both of us do have quite a lot of experience with this. And then we would also be having it as a healing village. And we had 5 successful years of growing from starting with a fund of $5,000 in 1 year to over $260,000 in the last year. And we were employing people who had no other source of employment, and a lot of joy, a lot of music, a lot of feasting. My son was also part of this village right from day one. We couldn't have done anything without my son. And he was also living here and overseeing all this building of our grandmother's hut and our teepees and our pit house and, our smokehouse and our tanning shed. And that's all his energy that went into making those things possible. And then we were joined by a young woman who appeared to be bringing in beautiful enthusiasm and energy and support and kindness. And, we really needed that. We needed a younger woman to get on board, and she came and she got on board and she was wonderful. And I suggested that doing something without more research wasn't a good idea. Well, that was it. That was apparently me personally criticizing this young woman's judgment or wisdom, or I don't know, but she took it personally. And it's like another personality completely took over. Completely took over her personality, which was no longer and is still no longer there. And this is going back to October 23rd was the date of the meeting. And I watched this transition happen. I saw her face and I thought, oh, there's trouble here. And so I, in writing, requested twice to have what I termed a conflict resolution meeting, because the communication between her and I just went completely lopsided. It was all of a sudden like I was her worst enemy in the world. She set her sights on me to destroy me, to annihilate me. And it was a kind of a drip, drip, drip. But at the same time, it was like starting little gossip and rumors, little poisonous things like this. And it seemed like nobody else could see what was going on. We had what was called a sacred circle, brought in some spiritual leaders who I highly respect and have known longer than I've known any of these people. And that was, it was beautiful. It was a ceremony, but it really had nothing to do with dealing with and solving the actual issue. It was all spiritual bypass. So as time goes by, I start hearing that she has spread this idea that I had mismanaged funds while I was dealing with the bank account. And so she put this into the ear of the other grandmother who I'd been working with for 10 years and convinced her. And this other grandmother said this to other people at a Christmas lunch. Unfortunately, the main person she said it to is a very, very, very dear friend of mine who called me immediately within a day or two. And she said, "Do you know what is going on here?" I said, "No, what's going on?" She said, "Blah, blah, blah, blah." And I thought, oh my God, that really hurt. Anyway, it threw me into this state of like being on a roller coaster and a merry-go-round at the same time. Just feeling like, where am I? What am I doing? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Who am I with? What in the heck is going on? Because nothing's making sense anymore. And what happened to our dream? What happened to our goals? What happened? And in the meantime, we had secured 3 years of funding with no necessity to report. And that was a result of the work, mainly of what we had put in prior to this to establish that we were a reputable foundation who was doing what we said we were going to do, which was true. And that's why this other large foundation said, yes, we're going to support you because we want to support what you're doing. So here's 3 years of funding, and you don't have to report back. Just keep doing the good work. Well, we're no longer doing good work. I'm still doing good work. I'm still collaborating. I'm still networking. I'm still doing everything I can to raise truth and justice to where it has to get to heal this world. I don't know what they're doing. They don't communicate with me anymore. I received an email from the accountant saying everything has been accounted for. Everything has been reconciled. The financial statements are done 2 weeks before that. But she very loudly said that to public shame me, I suppose you'd call it. And I was so stunned, I couldn't even say anything. I just sat there like, what the heck is going on here? And just in the last couple of days, because I'm praying and praying and praying, I started to get this message that you don't have to say anything. You really don't. I don't have to. I don't have to say anything. I can just be present by Zoom and not be physically in the same area because I don't want to be physically anywhere near them. But I can request to join this meeting by Zoom and just observe and let them know that I'm continuing to do the work that our funder has requested be done, and that's what I'm doing. And just let them be who they are and do what they're doing and not even not even take part at all other than that. And that's the message that I'm getting so far. And it sounds pretty positive to me that is maybe the best way to go about this.
Thank you, Pamela. And thank you, Patricia White, for sharing in that video. And you can see how helpful it is to have community involvement. And I hope you will all consider becoming involved in that way in our next series on the Tsalagi prophecy, the fifth world, and how the animals teach us to be more human. So at this time, we'd like to call on our guys. Unfortunately, James had a train derailment and he fixes the switches so the trains stay on the tracks. So he wasn't able to be with us at this time tonight, and we regret not having his message to share. But we would like to call on our sun dancer in Nova Scotia, Lenny, to share his insight at this time, please.
Thank you, Gail. This is certainly been kind of challenges for us as a council. It's with the Wendigo, and Wendigo is everywhere. And reflecting on what people have been saying here today, the grandmothers and our community members that had videos and shared pretty powerful messages coming. It's also, to me, like whole colonial is a matter of perspective. How do we choose to see the world? How do we choose to hear the world? How do we choose to walk in this world? How do we choose to feel the world? All those things are really what the colonialism does. Like way back when Marcia was talking about birth certificates, naming. It's so foreign to the way it was before the colonials came. Children would be given names that were of the elements of he who walks with the sun, or he who, it was a meaningful thing. It showed the character of the person. It wasn't, and then what happened? Along came the churches, the colonials, and all of a sudden you have to have a name, you have to have a number, we have to account for who you are, we have to put you down in our records. It's like, that's colonialism. When you all of a sudden you become an object. You're no longer part of that walking, living, breathing existence that your name comes from. So naming is very powerful in that whole certificate, and that's all a very deep part of colonialism. I want to share a story. I chose this story because it has different elements that I think when we talk about darkness and light. I'm sitting here in the darkness now, yet behind me you can see the wall hanging because of the light. We need the light and the darkness. We walk with that. So it's like all our grandmothers have been saying, what do we choose to emphasize? What do we choose to walk and bring forth? Do we look at the darkness and fear what's behind me in all this darkness? Or do we see the light coming through around the darkness that shines and walks with it? What do we feed ourselves with? This story, I'm a teacher. That's why I love my stories. So I always talked with the children, and it reminds me way back when I was teaching, teaching in this day and age is very colonial. It's like you have your academics. Who are you going to teach? What you have to teach this. You have to do this when you're in the classroom. You have to be accountable for this. Blah, 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 blah. I can go on and on about all the administrative and all the things teachers are expected to be. Well, I closed my door. And the only thing that mattered in that classroom is the academics were background. It was just things to bring in, to nurture, and to bring forth, and to honor those little beings that I was with. That's all that mattered. And the teaching in that classroom was so powerful, not because of me being a teacher directing, but because those children just came together as a community and wanted to do what they naturally do, which is to explore the world and to walk in the world. So, I did outdoor classrooms. I took them out in nature. They had to sit and just listen to the birds, write poetry from what they heard. It was all that. Colonial doesn't do that. It separates us, puts us in boxes, gives us a name that's accountable. Those children were accountable, other than helping each other, walking together as a community. And this story kind of reflects that. It reflects some of the sacred elements. It comes from a book called Sky Woman, Legends of the Iroquois by Joanne Shenandoah and Douglas M. George. And I have to give you a disclaimer. I don't profess to own any of this information or be the knowledge keeper of any of this. I'm just a teacher sharing a story that I love, that I came across in this book. The name of this story is Jigon Sase, Mother of Nations. In the western borders of the Iroquois lands, where the Niagara Falls empties the waters of Lake Erie into placid Lake Ontario, there dwelt a peaceful people known to all as the Neutral Nation. Despite their name, they were not quite as meek as one might think. Certainly, they were friendly and hospitable people, but they're also very sharp traders whose bartering skills brought them very great wealth. They were clever politicians. They kept out of the fighting that was going on among the other Iroquois nations by agreeing to keep their borders open to supply all the war parties with food and materials. The neutrals were suspicious of everyone, yet they were careful not to anger anyone that they had cause to fear. They trusted no one. When native people doubted the sincerity of a person, they would say, "Oh, he is as honest as a neutral." A neutral, they would say, is quick with a handshake, but even faster with his fingers. There was no neutral who seemed to enjoy the troubled times more than a woman called Jigansase, the lynx. That's what the translation of the name means. She had a lodge built on the main trail so she could watch the many war parties that traveled across neutral land. Jigansase made her home available to the men, giving them not only shelter, but food as well. She encouraged the fighters to eat as much as they desired from a large clay pot she kept full of with some meat. Some said was human flesh, others sometimes poison. So there's the Wendigo part of the story that's part of this tale that goes through the different nations. The human flesh eating part. Afterwards, she would fill their pipes with fresh tobacco, and while they were at ease, she would ask them clever questions about their adventures. She was a collector of information, which she used for power and profit. If the people wanted to know when their enemies would attack, they sent spies to her, laden with meat and furs to give her. And by the same token, if she wished to destroy a village, she could do so by giving its enemies information about its defenses, strengths, and weaknesses. She delighted in spreading gossip. She knew how to cause doubt and suspicion, sometimes for no other reason than amusement. She would destroy marriages and break apart families. She was as hated as she was feared, but no one dared to move against her because she enjoyed the protection of the powerful chiefs she shared the information with. Can you hear the little voices in her head? I think I can. Oh, look at the power you can get. Whoa, you can be so powerful. Do this, do that. Oh, look what I can give you. If you listen to me, you could be the most powerful person in the world. You could hurt your enemies. You can control everything. These are the voices of darkness. That's how darkness works. That was my little antidote to the story. So such evil, although long endured, could not be carried on forever. One day she heard rumors of a strange man wandering in Iroquois country. It seemed that this man with white hair and light complexion was preaching a message of peace, calling for all nations to abandon warfare. Everywhere he went, he had a tale to talk. He wanted to share this story of let's be peaceful. In time, she received the news he was coming from the east and would soon be at her lodge. Oh, she trembled with doubt and fear. Soon she heard singing coming from over the hills and watched as a warm glow filled with the eastern sky. I might mention also that white is a very sacred to First Nations, a buffalo, and that's the reason that this person would appear as white. White hair, white complexion. When the pipe was brought, white is a very sacred color. So that goes through the story too. In this story, anyway, see that. A man was walking toward her, his beautiful voice raised in song, so wonderful that she lost her fear and rose to welcome him into her home. She looked closely at the man. His speech was gentle, almost a whisper. His whole words were chosen with great care. He was clearly a man of dignity, of grace, impeccable, as Patricia would say. But it was his words, powerful and direct, which most affected her. He said he was sent by the great mystery, the Creator, to bring people back to the path of peace. He was to form a world union of nations, all bound of set of rules he called the great law of peace. This divine message of goodness was to take root in the hearts of the most terrible peoples of all, the warring tribes of the Iroquois territories. He had entered the lands of the Mohawks after crossing Lake Ontario in a white stone canoe. Those who had heard his words called him the peacemaker, because he taught of a different way of life which would end the war. He had come to the territory of the neutral nation because he had heard of Jigonso say, of how the things she was saying. He wanted to persuade her to walk and to help him. Well, she was pleased that such a man would come to her. She saw the good in what he was saying, the truth, you might say, of what different perspective, a different way of seeing than she had seen before. She had often wondered if there was a better way of living. Yes, she thought her ways were indeed evil, but until now, who had ever given her any hope life could be different? She wept, for here finally was a glimmer of light in that dim darkness of hostile world she lived in. She had been a bitter woman who trusted no one, but now she felt she could place her life in the hands of this gentle man. Well, she listened to him for many days, forgetting thirst and hunger. She accepted as truth all of what he said. The peacemaker went with her to the land of the Senecas, the fierce cousins of the bloody Mohawks. He brought her before the people, all of whom were surprised to see the despised Jagansa say in the company of this amazing man, this bringer of truth, this prophet, some would say. The peacemaker told the people that she had truly been a wicked woman, but was now into the ways of peace. Yet even in her acts of evil, she'd shown an intelligence upon which he could build his great League of Nations. and accept with her whole heart the great law of peace, because it was her intelligence and her cunning that allowed her to be, there's that little voice. How do you choose to use your gifts for that, for the darkness or the light? So the peacemaker would give this woman the power to select and dispose leaders of their nations. She was recognized. They would be given the title of clan mother, and the people would choose clan mothers to direct the families, while having the responsibility as the life givers of deciding upon all matters relating to life. She was sent forth with the peacemaker's message of hope. She settled among the Seneca nation, and there, in a town called Ganagodagan, she persuaded the people to turn away from war and peace. She was also present when the great tree of peace was planted on the shores of Onondaga Lake, marking the birthplace of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy. She devoted the rest of her life to teaching the great law of peace. So great was her wisdom, her counsel was sought by many native peoples. She persuaded all who heard her to abandon the warfare by following the great law. In her lifetime, she was honored with the title of Mother of Nations because she helped bring about a new and good way of living. That is the story. She's passed on to the spirit world. She left a tradition of strength and knowledge, which is carried on by the Iroquois women to this day, to the grandmothers, the clan mothers. So to me, I love that story. It had all the elements of, that darkness that I hear whispering in my ear so many times. I've worked with people that have been possessed with darkness, and it's always like one of our, was it Addie that said, no, it wasn't. It was Addie. Only seems to be humans that get possessed. It was from them these messages come. And in my experiences, sometimes they'll take the form of an animal, but it's through the human where they manipulate and they try to control. You don't rarely see them directly. You just hear the little voice in your head. So my message is choose your perspective. How do we do it? How do we find it? It's simple awareness, walking that path of being aware of, is it the right thing? Is it the thing our heart should follow in a good way, walking in the hoop? Or is it a voice out there trying to redirect us to the dark ways? Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny, for telling us sweet stories of pushing beyond duality through duality to balance. So normally at this time, we would ask Michael to wrap us up, as he does, and wrap up the series for us, but I think he just lost signal. So we may need to see Michael at the beginning of the next series, which we're looking forward to. How the animals are teaching us to become more human so that we can continue on to the fifth world in our Tsalagi prophecy of the fifth world. And we hope that you will join us in that series. We're not sure when we're going to start, but it will be soon. And we are very open
Michael's
to
back.
community
Michael's back.
sharing. I see him, Tricia. Thank you. So we hope that you will share your stories and your experiences of animals teaching you to be more human in our next series. And we will let you know when we're going to begin that series. And now I hope Michael is ready to wrap us up on this series, so we can get on to the next series. We're very excited about it because this one has been tough and that one should be fun. So we appreciate all of you for joining us in every way that you can. And Michael, if you would please wrap us up.
Yes, thank you, Gail. Before I do that, I just need a moment. Is there any last thoughts that anyone has from the council today before I do the wrap up here? Okay. As always, it's great to hear Lenny's stories. I really appreciate that we're bringing in more people's voices to be heard. And yeah, it's been an interesting technological day. My technology's been under attack, and for some reason, even with full reception, I've been on and off the call. But as many of you know, these are not just things that we talk about lightly, and there's a lot of time and energy that we put into as a council discussing these topics, researching, sharing our personal experiences, and really, diving deep into subject matter as we navigate our own wisdom journey. And then through that process, we typically find a time when we can, record these experiences and share them with an audience so that they can enjoy the benefit and insight from the council that we experience through these discourses. So I'm just arriving from talking about colonizing. I'm just arriving from Los Angeles into Ojai, California. And, listening to all this as I see all these cars and traffic and congestion and different thing definitely drives home the point of colonization and some of the darker topics we've been talking about and these malevolent forces. So, this is such an intense topic. We could go on for a long time about it, but what I really wanted to do is kind of, from my perspective, have a little bit of a overview and also at the end just dig into if anyone else has anything they wanted to share. But I think the biggest ways that I identify and try to transmutate, transform, or transcend colonization and identifying it is, I think at first and most important and obvious is individuation versus collaboration. And, I see, having the privilege of doing a lot of traveling in my life, from, the Amazon of Brazil to the deserts of the Sahara and Morocco to the crowded streets of Europe, traveling across North America from the Four Corners to places like San Francisco and Los Angeles. I see the biggest difference that really separates things is this idea of the individual versus the collective, individuation, and also the idea of the intellect as opposed to the heart, and this essence of compassion, looking at something bigger. And of course, I'm just sharing some of what's already been spoken today. But I think for me, that's very obvious. And how we identify it to really help transform it is, we live in a culture right now, especially after COVID. It's become more blatantly obvious because that exposed a lot of cracks in the matrix, let's say, or in the design, that we see all these symptoms again of alienation, disconnection, depression. People are unfulfilled. They're looking for their purpose in life. They could have low physical energy, mental attention, very little ambition. So for me, when we're connected to the nature's intelligence as opposed to a prisoner of colonization, I find, speaking from my personal experience, I'm not here to debate truths, as we all know, but share the insight that when I'm closest to nature and nature's intelligence, it generates a certain feeling within me of connection and understanding and peace and balance. But when I'm, again in the prison of colonization, and again, it happens to the mind, it not just happens to the body, as the John Trudell words were shared. There's really an entire different state of being and consciousness. And then, as Patricia was mentioning, there's also other aspects to that with, the division between humans and animals, but also how it relates to things like gentrification, sexualization. Everything, as Lenny said, become more divided, more myopic, more put in a category or in a column than seen as and participating in the greater whole of things. So to really drill down, I wanted to give a few ideas. I birthed both of my children at home, and we had a midwife, and we also birthed them in water. We did a lotus birth, and we didn't cut the umbilical cord because in the research that we did, we wanted to try to do, again, biomimicry and emulate, embody nature's intelligence. So I think really the first aspect of colonization can really come as early as birth. The way that we come into the world, the way that we're handled, the way that the woman is treated, and the whole sacred nature of the birthing process. So from there, it typically starts to stem into our family. And of course, we all know about genetic astrology. We sometimes inherit the history of our parents and grandparents, but typically colonization can happen within the family. And I'm not saying that family doesn't have or could have positive influence, but if they said hurt people. So if your parents, your family are coming from a place of disconnection and hurt, and they've had their mind colonized, and you can see where that really gets passed on very quickly to the child. And then again, going back to, as you were speaking about, Gail, and also Lenny, education, it seems like here in the colonial model, in the Eurocentric model, that, and it's not entirely, because I'm familiar with like Waldorf education and Montessori, there are other ways of education, but general education is just, to me, it's just it's a system of programming and reciting history, which is usually his story, which is usually created by whoever is the victor in these great battles of civilization, of land and people's souls and minds. So again, colonization happens through, it can happen through this education process if not guided properly. And again, weaving in nature, weaving in the holistic picture of the interconnection of things. And unfortunately now, in so much education, we've taken out art, music, vocational training, hands-on skills. Everything has been kind of reduced to science and technology and engineering and mathematics. They call that STEM, and it's a whole. And not to say that those aren't useful tools. I want to be clear, I'm not speaking against anything. I'm just sharing my modest perception and observations from experience, but we've taken, half of the essence of education out of the picture. We have a left and right brain, and there's different, the creative and the analytical. Then from there, I think colonization can happen with the health of people, or the health here in America, the health industry, and the idea of how that has been controlled and taken over, monitored. And of course, allopathic Western medicine has its place, but we're not looking at big picture of like nutrition, holistic health, other modalities of medicine, natural medicine, herbs, again, working with nature in a holistic system. I think one of the saddest things I see here in the colonized model, I've traveled a lot and I see where grandparents teach children and take care of children, but for some reason here in the United States, Turtle Island, that so much of our society is based on the parents are too busy to do anything, so they put the children in schools and daycare centers, and then the parents typically go to some sort of assisted living, because to try to survive in this capitalistic, the capitalism model, unless you're born into wealth, or you're gifted with abundance, it is a daily battle. So the breaking down again of the family, I think, is a really sad expression of colonization. And then of course, that leads me to think about institutionalization versus tribalization. Again, looking at things like a circle in a sacred way where all things are involved. And again, competition versus collaboration. I was listening to what Patricia White said. Remediation or mediation versus compartmentalization. Again, divide and conquer. And again, it always comes back to ecological design, biomimicry, nature's intelligence. So, yeah, those are some of the things I just wanted to share in the last few minutes of our immense wrapping up of this topic of dark and malevolent forces that influence humanity. And I mean, I think it's so prevalent a topic, especially in the world we see right now that's so divided. So I'm looking forward to bringing some soothing balm of nature and the animals, and other things that we can share. It's been, like you said, it's a grappling topic we've worked with, but we can't think that we're healing and we're feeling things and trying to move forward and mend the sacred hoop when we're packing skeletons in the closet and kicking things under the rug. So I appreciate the time here today, and for this weekly ongoing Grandmother Council, to listen to you, Gail, and Patricia, and Marcia, the wise women, and others who joined us today, and the Wisdom Council with Lenny and others who are meeting every week along with the grandmothers. And of course, I want to thank Pamela for her technical support, and the fact that we're going live now where people can comment and we can create some dialogue. We're not here just to bark out our thoughts and feelings, but to stimulate dialogue and communication, so humanity can mend the hoop, and we can move forward and dance into the fifth world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, and thank all of you for joining us in whatever way you can and sharing with your friends. And we will be letting you know soon when we'll begin the next series, and hope to see you then. Much love and gratitude to all. Until again.
Thank you all.